On the morning of the 1st of December, 1948, two men walking on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia, found a body. Well-dressed, leaning against a seawall. Cigarette half-smoked on the lapel. No wallet, no identification. Every label on every item of his clothing, shirt, jacket, trousers, tie, had been carefully removed. He carried a comb, a piece of chewing gum, a train ticket, and sewn into a hidden pocket cut into the waistband of his trousers, a tiny scrap of paper torn from the last page of a book. The two Persian words on it, translated to one English word, ended. The case ran for the next 74 years. In 2022, 3 Australians announced they had finally solved one of its 3 questions. Most coverage of this case ends with the 2022 announcement. The body now has a name. Headlines use the word solved. They were not wrong. They were also not complete. The Somerton Man case asks 3 questions. Who was he? What killed him? What does the code in the book mean? The 2022 work answered exactly one of them. The other 2 are still open. We are going to read what was actually settled and what wasn't. He was around 45 years old, 6 feet, in good physical condition by the autopsy's account. Strong calves, the kind a long-distance runner or a ballet dancer might have. The pathologist, John Bain Lyons, found his spleen enlarged to 3 times its normal size and unusual congestion in his organs. Lyons believed he had been poisoned, but the specific substance was never identified. Lyons's hypothesis was digitalis. The South Australia police photographed him, fingerprinted him, made a plaster cast of his face. They circulated his image and his prints to every police force in Australia and then to Interpol. Nothing matched. They buried him in West Terrace Cemetery in June 1949, 6 months after he was found, in a plot that was paid for by an anonymous donor. He stayed there, named only Unknown Man, for the next 72 years. 2 weeks after the burial, staff at the Adelaide railway station, less than 10 kilometers from where he was found, opened an unclaimed suitcase that had been left in the cloakroom. It had been checked in on the morning of the 30th of November, the day before he died. Inside were neatly folded clothes belonging to a man of his build. Every label on every item had been carefully removed. There was no name, only a thread, a single thread, the kind used for orange tape, that matched the thread used to repair his trousers. Whoever he was, he had not arrived in Adelaide by accident. He had a return ticket from the railway station to Henley Beach, dated the day he died, unused. He had a bus ticket. He had probably had a meal a few hours before his death, a pasty, which the toxicologists later studied for poisons and found nothing. He had, by every available indication, gone to Somerton Beach deliberately, on the evening of the 30th, and stayed there. The question of whether he killed himself or was killed by someone else was never settled by the original inquest. The coroner, Thomas Cleland, concluded his inquest in June of 1949 with the most unusual finding in modern Australian coronial history. He could not name the deceased. He could not name the cause of death. He could not even say with confidence whether it was suicide, accident, or murder. 4 months after the inquest, the case acquired a second mystery. A man, never named in the public file, handed in a copy of Edward Fitzgerald's translation of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam to the police. He said he had found it in the back of his unlocked car, parked near Somerton Beach, on the night of the death. The last page of the book had been torn out. The shape of the tear exactly matched the scrap of paper found sewn into the dead man's pocket. The 2 words on the scrap, Tamam Shud, were the closing words of the poem. Inside the back cover of the book, written faintly in pencil, were 5 lines of capital letters in apparently random sequence, MRGOABABD, and 4 more lines like it. To this day, no decryption has been independently verified. Code breakers at every Australian military service tried. The Defence Signals Directorate tried. Cryptographers at the University of Adelaide are still working on it. The most credible modern theory is that the letters are the first letters of the words of an unknown sentence, but which sentence and in which language, nobody has been able to fix. There was one more piece in the back of the book, a telephone number. The number led the police, in October of 1949, to a woman who lived less than half a kilometer from where the body was found. Her name was withheld from the public file for over 50 years. She would later be identified as a nurse named Jessica Thompson. She told the detectives she did not know the dead man. She kept telling them that for the rest of her life. Her son, Robin Thompson, born in 1947, a year before the body was found, had a particular and unusual feature shared with perhaps 1 in 100 million people, a missing pair of upper teeth, called hypodontia. The Somerton Man had the exact same dental anomaly. For decades, this was the closest piece of physical evidence anyone had to a relationship between the dead man and the family living half a kilometer away. It was not proof of anything, but it was a coincidence that no detective who has worked the file has ever been comfortable with. For 70 years, the case sat in roughly that condition. Identity unknown, cause of death unknown, code unbroken. Then, starting in the 2010s, two parallel things became possible at once. The South Australia police had retained the plaster cast of the dead man's face, and inside the mold were a small number of hairs. And forensic genealogy, the technique that solved the Golden State Killer case in 2018, had matured to the point where a few hairs could be enough. Derek Abbott, a professor at the University of Adelaide who had been working on the case for over a decade, paired with the American forensic genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick, they obtained DNA from the hairs. They ran it through the public genealogical databases. They built a partial family tree, and in July 2022, they announced the result. The Somerton Man was Carl Charles Webb, born 1905 in Footscray, Victoria, an electrical engineer and instrument maker, formerly of Melbourne, 43 years old when he died. Webb's biography filled in some but not all of the file's gaps. He had grown up in working-class Melbourne. He had been married. The marriage had collapsed acrimoniously in the mid-1940s. His wife had taken him to court. He had, by surviving accounts, struggled with depression. He had disappeared from Melbourne records sometime in 1947, the year before he died on Somerton Beach. The headstone in West Terrace Cemetery, which for 70 years had read simply, "Here lies the unknown man," has since been amended. It now carries his name. The South Australia police have closed the missing identity question. Webb is the Somerton Man, with a confidence Abbott has described as functionally certain. The Australian press, almost without exception, reported the case as solved. And here is where the careful reading begins. 3 things happened. A name was given to a body. A piece of personal history was attached to a man who had previously been a list of physical features. And a family, Webb's surviving relatives, was finally told what had happened to the relative who had vanished in 1947. All of these are real and load-bearing and worth doing. None of them is the same as solving the case. First, the code. The 5 lines of letters in the back of the Rubaiyat are not known to be Webb's. We do not know if he wrote them or if someone else did. We do not know what they say. The most plausible modern theory, that they are first letters of an unknown sentence, has not been independently confirmed against any candidate text. Webb's identification gave researchers a person to investigate. It did not give them the decryption. Second, the cause of death. The original toxicology by 1948 standards found no poison. Modern theories include digitalis, which Lyons hypothesized, barbiturates, or even self-administered cardiac arrest by sympathomimetic overdose. None of these has been confirmed against tissue. Webb's identification did not establish how he died, nor whether he died alone. The relationship between Webb and Jessica Thompson, whose phone number was in the back of his book, who lived around the corner from where his body was found, and whose son shared an unusual genetic dental trait with him, is now even more unresolved than it was before. She died in 27. She never explained the connection. The Somerton Man case asked 3 questions in 1948, and 3 Australians in 2022 answered one of them. That is real progress. It is also exactly the third of an answered file. The headstone in West Terrace Cemetery now carries a name. The drawer in the archive, however, is still labeled open.